That seems to me like that would be the perfect time to have community dinner. Except I guess it's always the moms that are down there working. So you have to take your mother or your wife out for dinner that day. Well, good morning. Spring is here. There's only a few snowbanks left, a few piles of snow, and Kevin and Donna are back, so it must be spring. It must be spring. Just by way of things that are coming up, we are getting close to finishing our series in Colossians. This is the second to the last time that we'll be in Colossians, but we're going to take another break. We took a break for Easter. We're going to take another break next Sunday. Chad Bigger will be here, and that'll be incredibly appropriate because Chad is the director out at Rock Ridge, and Rock Ridge Camp is the Missions of the Month next month. So Chad will be here filling the pulpit for me and then doing Sunday school as well, giving us some more details on camp ministry and Rock Ridge in particular. And then after that, we will have our last Sunday in Colossians. And then I think we will be beginning to explore a series on the church. What is the church? What does it look like? How does it operate? What is the body of Christ, and what is our role in it? So that is where we are headed. But this morning, if you would take your copy of the Scriptures, and you'll find Colossians chapter 3. If you're looking at a Pew Bible, it is page 1167. But Colossians chapter 3, beginning in verse 18, let me read that through the first verse in chapter 4. Boy, good thing it's not Mother's Day today, the way this starts out. We'll have a lot to unpack here. Here we go. Verse 18, wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they'll become discouraged. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you and to win their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not as for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for his wrong, and there is no favoritism. Masters, provide your slaves with what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven. All right, our main thought this morning as we work our way through these scriptures, these verses, our main thought this morning, you can see it on the screen there. Getting my rights is not all it's cracked up to be. Boy, this passage, this is hard for a bunch of us, isn't it? Especially as Americans. Man, we've got our rights. We demand our rights. What do you mean giving us instructions to submit and forcing us to love and to not be harsh? And children, obey your parents. And slaves, obey your master. No. I've got my rights. Boy, we camp on that a lot, don't we? And we do a lot of flag waving, and we do a lot of chanting about that. Now, in these verses, rights are implied, but the emphasis is on our duties. Our duties to do what is right. C.S. Lewis, in a little book called The Great Divorce, that's an odd title. You've heard me talk about it before. I actually have a copy I'm going to put up in our church library upstairs there. So if you need a copy, go check it out of the library up there. It's a wonderful little book. Back in the 1800s, there was a poet who wrote a great big great big epic poem. That's not that long, but it's long for a poem, called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. And his contention was, there's no such thing as heaven. There's no such thing as hell. They're both made up. They're the same thing. And he titled his poem, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. C.S. Lewis came by about 100 years later and said, no. There's a great difference. And he wrote The Great Divorce. So that's where that name comes from. It's a wonderful little book. It's about, again, you've heard me talk about it before. It's one of my favorite. It's about a bunch of people in hell that get to take a bus trip up to heaven. And hell is gray and dingy and hundreds of light years across because nobody can stand to be next to each other. And it's just ugly and they're actually ghosts. They're hard to see them. And they take this bus trip up to heaven, and heaven is beautiful. They look out the windows of the bus. You need to know all this to make sense of what I'm going to read. They look out the windows of the bus, and there's this beautiful green grass that they haven't seen for ages, and they take their shoes and socks off and run off the bus so they can run in this lush grass. And the grass shreds their feet, because the grass in heaven is more solid and more real than they are. And they get to have lots of conversations with other people in heaven. And this particular ghost gets to have a conversation with a guy that he knew on earth who was a murderer. Let's see where I can pick it up here. Personally, said the big ghost, the guy from hell. Personally, said the big ghost, with an emphasis which contradicted the ordinary meaning of the word personally, I'd have thought you and I ought to be the other way around. That's my personal opinion. Very likely we soon shall be, said the other, if you stop thinking about it. Look at me now, said the ghost, slapping his chest, but the slap made no noise. I'd gone straight all my life. I don't say I was a religious man, and I don't say I had no faults, far from it. But I'd done my best all my life. See, I'd done my best by everyone. That's the sort of chap I was. I never asked for anything that wasn't mine by rights. If I wanted to drink, I paid for it. If I took my wages, I'd done my job. See, that's the sort I was, and I don't care who knows it. It would be much better not to go on about that now. Who's going on? I'm not arguing. I'm just telling you the sort of chap I was. See, I'm asking for nothing but my rights. You may think you can put me down because you're dressed up like that, which you weren't when you worked under me, and I'm a poor man, but I gotta have my rights, same as you, see? Oh, no, it's not so bad as that. I haven't got my rights, or I should not be here, and you will not get yours either. You'll get something far better. Never fear. That's just what I say. I haven't got my rights. I always done my best, and I never done nothing wrong. And what I don't see is why I should be put below a bloody murderer like you. Who knows whether you will be? Only be happy and come with me. What do you keep on arguing for? I'm only telling you the sort of chap I was. I only want my rights. I'm not asking for anybody's bloody charity. Then do. At once ask for the bleeding heart of charity. Everything is here for the asking, and nothing can be bought. And it goes on. I got my rights. Oh, no. It's not as bad as that. You don't get your rights here. You get far, far more. And that is a little hard for us as red-blooded Americans to settle for. No. You don't get your rights. You can't earn your way. A common misunderstanding in following Christ is when things don't go our way and we think, after all I've done for God, after all I've done for Jesus, how could this happen? Don't I deserve something better? In fact, it was only a couple of weeks ago that I had this conversation with a dear friend whose life has gotten hard. And he was a man in ministry. And he set his faith aside now because, well, I followed God. I did so much work for God. And now look at what's happened. All those prayers didn't work. And so he set his faith aside. If I follow Christ, even in full-time ministry, if I'm working for him and things turn badly, well, that's not right, is it? What's the value of following Jesus then? Well, the value is that I learn of his sufficiency and the joy of his presence. And yes, that's far greater because everything else is fleeting. But Jesus is not. He is always there. And even when things go south, when what I'd tucked away for retirement, my job that I'd worked so hard at and then lost, all of that is fleeting. But in the midst of all that, Jesus is always there. Yeah, but I got to have my rights. No, it's better than that. Jesus sticks with you, even when you don't deserve it. We are under a curse. It's the curse of sin. And that has ruined everything for now. But it won't always be so. And we've talked about this so often. I get the chance now to live in eternity. A whole different view. I get to live a different way than the rest of the world. Yeah, but this has gone wrong and I know. But it won't always be so. And that's the reality that I want to live in. Now, this passage, like I said, the way it starts, this passage may sound a little disparaging of wives and women. Wives in this passage are told to submit. But I want to remind you, look at what the submission is born out of. It is submission as is fitting to the Lord. It's a kind of submission like we all need to have towards each other that reflects well on Jesus. It's a submission out of response to the love of a husband. And we'll look at that in a minute. Let me get a little nerdy on you here. The verb to submit there, oh boy, forgive me for those of you that hated literature in high school and English in high school, but it's written grammatically in what's called the middle voice. That means that it's not in the active voice or the first person voice where the subject, in this case, the wife, is forced to act in submission by a demanding husband. You understand this. The first person voice will be, I will submit. Okay? I'm choosing that, and I will submit. Or it's forced upon you, the active voice, you will submit. You can hear a demanding husband. Well, that's not the way it's written. It's also not written in the passive voice. The passive voice is where the subject, again, the wife, is almost discounted, not important, completely unimportant. Like perhaps it could have been written, oh, she'll submit, just offhandedly. Like the wife isn't important, it's, oh yeah, she'll submit. This is written in what's called the middle voice, and that means that it's a voluntary act by the wife in response to two things: to the actions of a loving husband and to reflect her submission to the Lord. So it's not this demanding thing. Husbands, we can't point to this verse and say, honey, look, see? No, it's in response to a loving husband. Well, and verse 9 says that. Or I'm sorry, verse 19 says that. Husbands, love your wives. Now, in this case, it is written in the first person voice, the active voice. It is a command. Husbands, love your wife. And if right now your wife is elbowing you and saying, see, listen, well, yeah, she should, because it is a command. Husbands, love your wife. This is developed a little further in the parallel book or letter that Paul wrote in Ephesians. If you've got your pew Bibles and want to look it up, it's page 1159. In your pew Bibles, Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. In fact, I think we have it on the screen there. And I'll find it. It's a passage where Paul develops this much, much further. Ephesians 5, starting in verse 25. Thank you. Husbands, love your wives. Okay, another command. First person voice. Just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own body. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds it and cares for it just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Now, once again, I don't hear any gasps. What? Love your wife? See, in this culture, in this context, no, wives would have been more property than anything else. And what? Paul, you're telling us to love our wives? Well, I mean, that's nice and all that, but we own them. For the first century mind, this is elevating wives to a point of loving her more than you love your own bodies would be a very, very strange thought. We are commanded to love. This maybe is really dumb, but I've got this wonderful old commentary. It's 130 years old, this old commentary. And the gentleman that wrote it gives an example from history of a husband demonstrating his love for his wife. And I double-checked it. It actually happened when the Hebrews were enslaved in Babylon, and then King Cyrus came along and released some of them. This historian, Xenophon is his name, relates that when Cyrus had taken captives a young prince of Armenia, together with his beautiful and blooming wife, of whom he was remarkably fond, they were brought before the tribunal of Cyrus to receive their sentence. The warrior inquired of the prince what he would give to be reinstated to his kingdom, and he replied that he valued his crown and his liberty at a very low rate. But if the noble conqueror, Cyrus, would restore his beloved wife to her former dignity and possessions, he would willingly pay his life for the purchase. The prisoners were dismissed to enjoy their freedom and former honors, and each was lavish in praises of the conqueror. And you, said the prince, addressing his wife, what do you think of King Cyrus? She said, I did not observe him. Not observe him, exclaimed her husband. Upon whom then was your attention fixed? Upon that dear and generous man, she replied, who declared his readiness to purchase my liberty at his own life's expense. Yeah, okay, isn't that, I mean, that's like, come on, that's like a Hallmark story there, movie. Husbands, love your wives. And it goes on to say, husbands, we get a double whammy there. It goes on to say, and don't be so surly and grumpy. Husbands, sometimes we're quick to be grumpy and dismissive, and Paul says, stop it. Don't be that way. All right, children, and we've already dismissed them. That's too bad. They should hear this. Children aren't left out of this submission thing. Children, obey your parents in everything. When does that end? Are we always to be submissive to our parents? My father-in-law is 96. I think Deb and I are old enough to make some decisions on our own now, but Deb still has a dad. And it says, I think to put it in context, let's go back to Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. It's the 5th commandment. You probably already know it by heart. Children, obey your parents. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord is giving you. It's one of the commands to honor our father and our mother, and I wish it gave an age on that. Now, that can be very difficult as we get older and adult. We're adults, and then we're actually caring for our parents as well. How do you put that together? Of course, we are never called, either as young kids or as adults at any time, to obey our parents in rebellion to God's laws, but sometimes it's the difficulty of letting older parents make their own decisions. We're still called to do our best to honor them. I can advise and counsel my 96-year-old father-in-law. I can give him advice. He and I, just last Thursday we were together, we're looking at Scripture together, and I was helping him think through things. But in the end, whatever decision he makes, I need to honor as much as possible. That's respect. That's giving honor to your parents. In the Chronicles of Narnia, if anyone loves those books as much as I do, my favorite character is Reepicheep, the mouse, the little warrior mouse. That guy is awesome. He's great. And when he meets King Caspian early on, Caspian is trying to make a decision, and Reepicheep thinks he's making the wrong decision. And he says so. And he gives all sorts of explanation as to why. No, King Caspian, we shouldn't do that. This would be a much, much better way to handle it. And Caspian actually gets kind of upset and frustrated with him. In fact, he says, I'm willing to accept a talking mouse, but not one that talks so much. And finally, Prince Caspian, soon to be King Caspian, makes his decision, and it's different than what Reepicheep thinks he ought to do. But Caspian asks for volunteers. And guess who volunteers first? Reepicheep. I love that little character. And Caspian is like, wait, you were arguing against it, and now you're the first to volunteer. And he says, yes, I was acting as your advisor then, and now I'm acting as your subject. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's loyalty. That's submission. Reepicheep, read the Chronicles of Narnia again. Husbands, in verse 21, like I said, we get a double whammy concerning children. We're told to, they're told to obey us, but we're told, and parents, dads especially, don't embitter them. Don't do stuff that discourages them from following Christ. Are you an encourager by nature? Or are you a bit more critical, always pointing out, dads, always pointing out where a kid is screwed up? In the 39 years that I knew my dad, I only remember him raising his voice twice. I remember we had 5 boys in our family, Harvey, Howie, Herbie, Hadley, and Harmon. We don't need to go into all of that. My dad's name was Harry, and it goes on. But I remember one of my older brothers was driving, Dad was riding in the front seat. The rest of us were in the back seat, and he was going too fast. My brother was driving too fast. And my dad told him, I think you need to slow down. But he wouldn't. And Dad told him again, no, you need to slow it, and told him again. And finally, as he didn't, my dad, for the first time I remembered, raised his voice and told my older brother, you will slow down now. And it was scary to hear my dad like that. The other time was when one of my brothers disrespected my mother. Oh, wow. But those are the only 2 times. Dads, don't embitter. Let me brag on my dad a little bit more. We did a lot of construction stuff around the house, added on to the house. We built, as kids with my dad, we built a 2.5 stall garage with a 2.5 stall basement. It was a split level garage. You can drive in at the top or underneath. We could only ever fit 1 car in because we always had so much stuff that everyone was working on. But I remember as I was down in the basement and with my dad, and we had gotten the walls built up, and he told my brother, one of my older brothers, he drew a line in the dirt and said, okay, backfill against this wall, but only to here, because I know the wall isn't cured yet, but we just need some working room. Backfill up to this line, and my brother overdid it and backed up way too close and collapsed the walls. I remember my dad and I down in the basement there, as these walls start to come, and my dad, all he did was yell, look out, and he and I jumped. And then here, my brother is half in the basement and half out on that tractor with the wall collapsed. Okay, dads, at that point, what would have been your response? You know what my dad's response was? Well, do you think you can drive it up out of there, or do you think you need to back it down in here and then we'll figure out how to get the tractor out? That was it. That was it. And we got the tractor down in, and then we drove it out the back, and my dad said, well, let's see how many of these we can rescue. And we started digging out cement blocks and scraping off dirt and old mortar. Dads, don't exasperate your kids. We have a tendency to do that. Well, in verse 22, it sure looks like Paul's endorsing slavery, doesn't it? Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. All right, we need to, this is not a cop-out. This is not a cop-out, but we need to put it into context. Remember, this is not American version of slavery, okay? This is in the Middle East. Ancient Middle East slavery rarely involved any violence and was pretty common. Now, that doesn't excuse it, but it does give context to remember things like the year of Jubilee. Do you remember what that was? Every 50 years, all debts canceled. All slaves go free. All property goes back to the original family owner. Do you know that 2025 is the year of Jubilee? This year is a year of Jubilee for an Orthodox Jew. So if you at this point like to claim to be an Orthodox Jew, just call your bank up and tell them, hey, it's the year of Jubilee. We get to set aside all of that. And let's remember, too, that the church at this point was just a tiny group of people in a very pagan city. They're not going to have a lot of clout. You know, if they started protesting, the government would be like, what's that? And just move on. So it's in that context that the Apostle Paul is telling them, be diligent in your work. Not only when your master is looking, but all the time. Be diligent in it, because what you're doing reflects on Jesus. Verse 25, do everything as unto the Lord. It's the Lord Christ you're serving. That stands in total contrast to, I've got my rights. No. Set that aside. You're going to do this as a reflection on Christ. Notice, too, that it's in the context of the family. That's often where the position that slaves almost held. Masters are warned to give servants what is right. And then he gives a word to the masters. You've got a master too. Boy, that's even better than rules that protect the slave. It's a reminder to the masters, guess what? Yeah, you're not the master. You both have the same master, and that is God, and you are responsible to God. God is the ultimate judge, and your job is to work as though you were pleasing God. In fact, note the context in every category. Wives, be submissive, as is fitting in the Lord. Children, obey your parents. It is well-pleasing to the Lord when you're obedient to parents. Servants, fear the Lord and work as unto the Lord, not as unto your master. Your conduct, our conduct, reflects on God, and am I representing Him well? When the community sees your integrity, your treatment of other members of your family and your larger household, when the community sees your attention to quality work, will it reflect well on your Savior? Again, we've talked about this so many times. Will people see your good deeds, your good work, the peace that infuses all of your relationships? And will they be so attracted to that that they'll want to know the Savior that you know? In John 13:35, it's in Jesus' own words, and Jesus himself sums it up this way as he's talking to his disciples. He says, by this will all men know that you're my disciples, by the love that you have for each other. By this will all men know that you're my disciples, by the incredible apologetic arguments you're able to. No. By this will all men know that you're my disciples, by the incredible preaching that you're able. No. This is how men are going to know that you're a disciple of Jesus, by the love that you have for one another. LedgeRock, we live in a time in history and a place that is full of conflict. Oh my goodness. You walk 3 feet in any direction, you can figure out something to argue about. That's just the world and the place that we live in. But we at LedgeRock get to be a beacon of peace and hope and a different way to live in the reality of eternity, and as we express our love for each other. The rest of the Ely community, I think, is going to scratch their heads and say, I don't understand those people, but I'm so intrigued by them. May that be true of us as we submit in love to each other. Let me pray. Father, I thank you. Oh, that your way of living is so counterintuitive to the way the rest of the world wants to live. Father, I thank you that you are so gracious in not giving us what we deserve. Father, we would be foolish to demand our rights. We thank you that you are a gracious and loving Father who shows us mercy and gives us what we don't deserve. Father, help us to live that way. Help us to be that example of your love towards us to all of those around us by the way we love each other. In